So now I'm introducing Cordyceps. Cordyceps is a natural mushroom, and Cordyceps is really amazing for your immune support. So if you have allergies, if you have asthma, Cordyceps is great. If you have thyroid issues, Cordyceps, again, is a great supplement that can help support your thyroid, as well as diabetes. So if you have sugar issues with regulation, Cordyceps is really a great way to go. Also, it helps with energy as well. So it's a great supplement to take in the daytime. You can take it with food, without food, and it's all natural.
Hey, this is Katie Walker with Rethink with Revitalist on how we are changing the narrative of mental health. I'm excited to let you know that we are now doing something called 22 Raw, to where we sit down with veterans. We have 22 real-time conversations, raw video, raw verbiage, talking about real-time issues that veterans need to hear. So I hope you enjoy listening to all of these amazing leaders being vulnerable in this space, helping to make the change that's needed. Thanks for watching. Hey, it's Katie Walker, and we are here today with Jon Dalton, and we are at the MCON conference, and really talking about the ways that we're changing the narrative on mental health. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Jon Dalton, and I currently run an organization called the Nevada Coalition for Psychedelic Medicines. I am a retired SEAL. I did 23 years in the SEAL teams, did roughly 11 combat deployments, also had about 7 traumatic brain injuries throughout that, and served in both Iraq and Afghanistan.
Thank you for all the service.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you work in psychedelics now?
I do. And so I'll give you some backstory on what got me there, because I'm kind of a, that reluctant champion, so to speak. Like I say, I did a bunch of combat deployments forward, got a bunch of, knocks to the head, a little bit of overpressure, and some skydiving accidents. And I'm going through my career, and around 2014, I'm starting to recognize some things going on. So I got sent to something called the National Intrepid Center of Excellence. And that's a 4-week inpatient program for traumatic brain injury or PTSD at Walter Reed Hospital. And started to figure out that, there's perhaps some neurological things going on. And, they were talking to me like, hey, you might have, PTSD as well. And my first reaction to that was, that's for other people. I don't have something like that. And I later, did a turnaround on that when I really discovered what PTSD is. And I was also diagnosed with operator syndrome, which is where you just deploy so much that you're so hypervigilant all the time that you really do well at your job, but then you come home and maybe you're not so good.
Nope.
And so I left the command I was at in 2014 and was planning to go to Fallon to run the Navy's JTAC school. And I did that, and I was planning on transitioning out of the military after about 23 years. And I was getting my MBA. I was going into private equity, and everything seemed to be tracking according to my plan. And in 2018, I retire. And shortly after, and perhaps a little bit before, but it was really noticeable once I left the military, that I started getting some, pretty bad anxiety, and started getting depression. And these are all things that I considered to be, atypical of a SEAL. And we don't get things like that. You don't have anxiety if you're going on target night after night. And it started getting worse. I started to have some real challenges, so I went to the VA and I talked to them about it. And they proceeded to put me on SSRIs. So Prozac or Zoloft or sertraline, you can pick, because they're always putting you on different ones to try to find the one that works. And the one thing that worked with it was the side effects, which were awful. They were awful, and I didn't like them one bit. I didn't find myself responding, so they just kept putting me on different different medication, and it just wasn't working. I continued.
Did that go on? So you retired in 2018 and started putting you on medication?
Yeah, probably a couple of years. And I finally was like, look, this isn't working for me. And around the same time, another SEAL brother that I knew came up to me and he's like, hey man, you may want to, I know you got some stuff going on. You may want to take a look at psychedelic therapy and psychedelic medicine. And my first response was, that sounds like a bunch of hippie drugs done by a bunch of hippie veterans to go get high and escape reality. I wanted to have nothing to do with it. And he's like, no. He's like, just take a look at it. And at first I didn't. I was just like, that's ridiculous. I'm a lifelong conservative, I'm a Second Amendment guy. When I was at SEAL Team 4, I did counter-drug, counter-narcotic missions in South America.
Okay.
So I saw the real war on drugs. I saw, indigenous people getting oppressed. I saw underground, coca facilities.
Yep.
And, the horrors that had there for those people. And so I basically had an all-in-one impression of what drugs were. And I wrapped psychedelics right into that. But I was getting worse. And I was thinking about my buddy and what he said. And so I started to do some research. And I started doing more research. And what I started finding was that the narrative that I had understood about these drugs was not in fact what they were. And I discovered that in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, before they Timothy Leary got a hold of them and started sprinkling LSD all over the hippies, that they were used they were being studied for therapeutic purposes, nothing but therapeutic purposes, and that Nixon had put them promptly on the Schedule I Controlled Substances Act, illegalized them, made it impossible to do any more studies. And this is because of the hippie counterculture getting a hold of it. And, there were things that were done wrong back then. And one of them was what Timothy Leary was doing, and the other was what Nixon did as a reaction.
By just two separate fields.
Two separate things. It put psychedelic medicine in the corner, like a bad boy for 50 years. Nothing had happened. Meanwhile, guys from Vietnam have PTSD and they're suffering. There's no treatment for it at the time. And, we fast forward to the first Gulf War and then, OEF and OIF, in Afghanistan and Iraq. And we're seeing a lot of PTSD. We're seeing blast overpressure for traumatic brain injuries. And we're recognizing that there needs to be something done here. Meanwhile, back to my story, I realize, okay, I'm kind of at rock bottom here. The future is not bright. The future is dark. And I figured, well, this is where I'm at in life. I'm going to give this a shot. What could go wrong at this point? I'm also a rule follower. I don't believe in breaking the law. You can't do this stuff in the United States. It's illegal. It's still Schedule I. And so I went to Mexico. I went through Marcus Capone's organization, Veteran Solutions. They graciously, paid for me to go down to Mexico and embark in an ibogaine and 5-MeO DMT experience, treatment. Prior to doing that, I engaged in the kind of the beginning portions of what's considered psychedelic-assisted therapy, where I worked with a therapist, a psychedelic coach, to start kind of working towards that treatment, trying to understand the things that were going on with me so that when that treatment happened, I was primed for it. This is a really effective way of engaging in this kind of therapeutic treatment. It's much more effective than, say, just throwing somebody some, mushrooms and say, take this over the weekend and you'll be better. I did the treatment. The results were profound and absolutely transformative. One of the takeaways from it that I realized that occurred during that was that I had been closing down my emotional aperture after deployment, so that when, there were friendly KAs and brothers that were going home and C-17s, in coffins, and I'm home and I'm going to memorial services of more of them, I needed to close that aperture down and compartmentalize so that I could be fully functional, which is what I was. And that way I could operate the next day, even the next hour after something, and go to work and do my job. And I think compartmentalization is a phenomenal tool. The problem with it is you're not really taught how to uncompartmentalize something.
About a lot of things.
Yeah, exactly. And what this helped me realize was that I was closing down all of the feelings, every positive feeling of, love and kindness and empathy that I had to not just everyone, but also my loved ones, to include my son, to include my girlfriend. And I recognized that I was coming up with all these reasons to justify shutting down my emotions so that I wouldn't have to, perhaps get hurt, perhaps feel that anguish. And that treatment made me realize that that's absolutely the wrong thing to do at this point in my life. I'm now at a point I don't need to do that anymore. And it helped me with that. Simultaneously to that treatment, what I became aware of is the neurological changes that was going on, right? With something like a powerful psychedelic like ibogaine, and of course psilocybin is very, very similar in the fact that
In mine, psilocybin is a safer psychedelic.
Psilocybin is a safer psychedelic. Ibogaine is good with the proper screening, but it's not good for everybody.
Correct.
And it's why you don't want to go around the street looking for it. You're definitely not going to go around the street looking for it and go party, because it's not a fun time. At the same time, I'm what's happening in my brain, as you know, is something called adaptive neuroplasticity. It's helping with these neural pathways that were set in my brain, these rutted grooves in my neural pathways that when something happened, it would cause me to engage those pathways, those rutted grooves, and go into an anxiety mode or a depression mode or a drinking mode.
Yep.
And, go to grab a drink, because that's the automatic of how to fix that situation, quote unquote. And so this is important because the weeks to follow and the months to follow was an integrative process.
Right.
And I discovered that it is equally important, if not more important, than that treatment in which you're in an altered state of consciousness.
So picture the integrated piece, what you just said.
Yeah.
And picture all psychedelics.
Yes.
And the power of integration with these medications versus the 2 years that you were at the VA and they were giving you all these antidepressants and all the, the whole shebang and all the different recipes, making you feel like a guinea pig.
Yeah.
Like, take this every day, you'll feel better. Take this every day, you'll feel better.
Yeah.
We get to the point, right? Because you were such an amazing operator for so many years, like that was your role. That was your identity. That was what you had control of.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, us in the civilian world are like, Coach, you're getting to retire. That's great. Come on back.
Yeah.
You don't know how to come back because this was your life for 23 years and that's all you knew.
Yeah.
So, so the amazing piece, right, with psychedelics and integration is when you take these substances, they put you in a space that allows you kind of this like flat landscape to where you were able to recognize the love, the kindness, all these things that you were not implementing in your life because honestly, the love and the kindness and all that stuff, like when you're a SEAL and you're being deployed all these times, like you can't walk around and be like, oh no, let's love everybody and be kind. It's like, no, you're there. You're not there to talk. You're there to execute and get things done, period. Absolutely. Right? So it's all objective and we don't teach you the subjective pieces. We just expect you to know them when you come back. And you feel that something's wrong, but you don't know what it is. And so when you take these psychedelic medications and we're like, no, like therapy is a huge piece with these psychedelics, integration is a huge piece.
Yes.
Not saying that you need therapy.
Right.
Saying that you're an expert at being a SEAL. You're not an expert at feeling peace and calm and having love for yourself and love for others and kindness for yourself and kindness for others because you've not been taught that in the last 23 years that you were in the military. So what psychedelics do, as you know, they allow us to open up to where like, oh my gosh, that's what I was missing.
Yeah.
So we're allowing ourselves to kind of have that rebalance of the brain to where you feel like not only are you integrated with yourself, but you're aligned with who you are. Because, you know, being in the military and coming back from the military, your life coming out of the military, it's gone. That previous life is gone. You are now this amazing warrior that's been trained, that's going back to the civilian world. So you are on a different level.
Right.
And you have to learn those things. And that's the beautiful thing about psychedelics with integration, with therapy, is we're able to start teaching those skill sets and building that full immersion of what those skill sets would be like. So you don't have to be on therapy the rest of your life.
No.
You don't have to do integration the rest of your life with help, with therapists,
Right.
because you understand now how to apply these skills.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I recognize is it is so different than anything that you've ever experienced. And you realize the opportunity that you have at that point in time to change your life.
Yeah.
It's
freedom.
It's freedom. In America, where, you know, there's like, take a pill, you get better, but you don't do the work, right? That makes you realize, okay, I'm not going to fuck this up. I'm going to do the work.
Yeah.
And that's where that integrated process, like you just said, with that therapist to help you work through and solidify these changes.
It's skills that we've never been taught. And these are professionals that went and got their master's, their doctorate. That's all they're taught. It's like, can you show us what you all are trying to do so we can actually learn and integrate this? And picture this, like when you did the drug tests and things like that in the military, what would happen if we said, all right, every time you take a Xanax, I want you to take it while you're doing a 30-minute meditation session.
Yeah.
And I need you to document it. And if you don't document this when you're taking your benzo or your opiate or your stimulant, then I'm not going to prescribe it to you anymore, because I need you to do the work with this drug. Could you imagine what the opioid crisis would do? So they need to go on the street because they weren't going to get prescribed them anymore.
Yep.
But it's like, we see in the psychedelic space, we see the power of all the skills that we don't have. You know, so that's a really, really big piece. So tell us about, how are you helping to change the narrative in Nevada?
Thanks. Yeah. So after this happened and I came back and I realized how powerful this is and how this can help veterans and first responders everywhere, I aligned with a group on a federal level, which is Veteran Mental Health Leadership Coalition, and on the state level, because I spent enough time in government to realize that I don't trust the federal government. I mean, there's over 38 states that have certain different degrees of cannabis legalization, and yet they can't pull that off of Schedule 1. I didn't even have to agree with cannabis to say that's stupid. So I didn't have the faith that the federal government was going to be able to make this happen. So we decided to attack this on the state level. And so we formed the Nevada Coalition for Psychedelic Medicines. Our mission is to enable regulated, legalized access for psychedelic-assisted therapy, which is what I just described, for in the state of Nevada, with qualified therapists that have psychedelic training, psychedelic therapy training, service centers that are that are set up properly, environments where we know we can trust the person that's giving this medicine, that we know the medicine is of good quality, that we know that there's going to be at least two medical professionals that will be in the room to make sure that you're safe as you're in this very vulnerable environment. So we brought on board lobbyists. We have a communication strategy that we've deployed to enact cultural change event in the state of Nevada to help everyone, regardless of political ideology, understand that this is not the drugs that we thought it was from the 70s. Get rid of those false narratives, and then also get rid of the stigma by legalizing it, so that people understand this is really powerful. So we meet with legislators on a regular basis. I particularly meet with conservatives that were just like I was 3 years ago. We go in there, our lobbyist gets us in the door. I explain what's going on. My partner, who's our executive director, she'll give them the neuroscience perspective, and 9 times out of 10, they're all on board. And so is, by the way, Governor Rick Perry, Dan Crenshaw, Ted Cruz. There's so many conservative politicians that are advocating for this on whether it's the state or federal level, because they see what it can do to help veterans.
Yeah, and that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
So it's one thing, would you tell veterans if they're out there and they're questioning life right now, what's the one thing you would tell them?
Yeah, if you're suffering from PTSD or anxiety or depression or suicidality or traumatic brain injury, don't trust me. I simply ask that you have enough faith, just like that SEAL brother that talked to me, that you do some homework on it. Go to the Nevada Coalition for Psychedelic Medicine website, which is nevadacpm.org. On it, there's a research and education page, and you can find study after study by premier institutions like Johns Hopkins, Stanford, UC Berkeley, Harvard, Imperial College London, that shows the efficacy, in other words, the value and the effectiveness of this stuff. And don't go to the underground if you can avoid it. Try to get to an organization like Veteran Solutions or Heroic Hearts or The Mission Within. There's a number of them out there that will help you to go to Mexico. But most importantly, especially if you're a Nevadan, connect with us. Sign up to our newsletter. Be a part of our coalition, because we need your support. When we're lobbying and we're talking to legislators and we're in front of the state legislature, we need you there to help us, because we can get this changed. We can get it changed and these laws changed. So at scale, we can help thousands.
We need the volume
of not just veterans and first responders, but all Nevadans. And we can normalize this conversation.
Yep. Well, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
Keep chatting.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode. I hope that it brought you some insight and some impact into your life. For more on Revitalist, check out revitalist.com. Be sure to subscribe to this, as we are going to continue to change the narrative on mental health by bringing in a whole facet of groups in order to help address this global mental health crisis that we are all feeling. So thank you so much to the partners that were on this episode, and to get more information about them, please click on the links below.